SMEs and startups are often described as the backbone of any economy, and in Zimbabwe that couldn't be more true. Now, from bustling informal markets to ambitious tech startups, these businesses fuel innovation, create jobs, and contribute significantly to our GDP. But how do they survive, let alone thrive, in a challenging economic environment? What support systems exist to help them scale, formalize, and expand beyond our borders? And how can they navigate issues like counterfeit goods, compliance, and market access? Now, to help us unpack all this and more, we are joined by a representative from the SME Association of Zimbabwe, who is Farai. Good evening, Farai.
Good evening.
Awesome. It's a pleasure having you out here on Your Wealth.
Thanks.
Now, let me get straight into our questions, Farai, so that we can get our viewers to understand more about SMEs and the environment they're operating, especially in Zimbabwe. Now, how would you describe the current state of SMEs and startups in Zimbabwe?
Well, I think if you look at the economy, obviously the economy is struggling. We are seeing factors like informalization coming through. So you'll find that when you look at your SMEs or your startups or SMEs, or what we refer to as the growth-oriented enterprises, you know, the big corporations of tomorrow, they are also operating in this challenging environment. So you are finding that they too are under stress for various reasons.
All right, interesting. Now, what are the biggest opportunities for growth for Zimbabwean SMEs locally, regionally, and internationally?
Okay, maybe to start off with the local. The local, obviously, the environment is quite challenging. As they always say, with crisis comes opportunity. So sometimes there are opportunities, where systems are failing. There are opportunities to actually make up for that. So you're finding that, for example, we've got problems with electricity. So a lot of people are going into alternative energy, your renewables, your solar, and so on. We have challenges with water. Again, you find a lot of SMEs in borehole drilling, that sort of thing. So to some extent, there's that. But unfortunately, I think the biggest challenge that we are seeing is that most people are going into the low barrier businesses, which is basically your buying and selling or trading, and of course the informal sector. So yeah, there are some opportunities locally, but obviously there are quite significant headwinds. Regionally, what I would say is it's a bit of a complex situation that we have. If you look at the region generally, you'll find that outside of South Africa, probably most of us are doing the same thing. We're into basic agriculture, perhaps mining. We produce commodities. There's very little in terms of value addition. There's very little in terms of beneficiation. So that in itself does present an opportunity, but you also find that those higher level industries also require quite a lot of capital. They require a lot of skilled personnel. They require factors like power, things that would enable businesses to operate in those sort of spaces. And what you are finding is that things like the power problem is not just a local problem, it's a regional problem. But the region generally, you'll find that most countries are almost in the same predicament as us, to lesser or greater extents, depending on circumstances. So you're not finding too much of regional expansion, especially when you are looking at Zimbabwean businesses going outside the country. In fact, what we are seeing a lot more of is people coming from outside into the country. Internationally, obviously, I would say we're not yet there. Even when you look at the country as a whole, there are only a handful of businesses that have actually managed to scale up to what can be termed as international levels of operation. But it's obviously something we should aspire to. Despite us being a small country, we should aspire to those things. So Long and short, I think at the moment it remains almost a pipe dream for us, but we do have our sights set there.
All right. As you were just responding to that question, something just came to my mind, and I just want to get clarity from you. I've seen a lot of, SMEs coming up, right? Do these SMEs see, what can I say, a future where they will actually grow, or they're in that comfortable zone where they say, you know what, we're operating our businesses, we're getting the profits that we want, so there's no need for us to actually scale up or, become big. Is that the situation we are finding ourselves in Zimbabwe, or it is different?
Yes, to a large extent. I think there's two factors. Number one, obviously, is just the factor that because of the collapse of the formal economy, you are finding a lot of people become almost what we call involuntary entrepreneurs or involuntary business people.
Okay.
They are going into it to survive, and that's why you find our informal sector has expanded so much. So most of those people, I would say, would not really have, the thought of growing. However, there are some people who obviously start businesses, have some big ideas. Maybe the scale may differ. What we found in general is that most of our businesses, once they reach what we would call medium-sized enterprise, in other words, the business is profitable. It's generating comfortable income. They can send their kids to schools, nice schools. They can buy nice cars, build houses. We find that most of our entrepreneurs tend to stagnate at that sort of level.
Yeah.
Very few want to go beyond, to expand, to have national presence, and even beyond, to even then move out into the region and so on.
Okay.
But I would say also there's two factors to it. Number one, most businesses do tend to be that way. So very few businesses actually tend to scale up. But there's also number two, we are a small economy.
Right.
So it's also very difficult to actually build and scale up a business. It's unlike someone who's operating in maybe, for example, South Africa or Nigeria. They are bigger markets, they've got more room to expand internally, and thus raise capital, momentum, and so on, to be able to then move out into the region or even globally.
Okay, interesting. Now, but what role does the SME Association of Zimbabwe play in supporting emerging and existing businesses?
All right, I would say our role, in fact, our mission is growing startups, small and medium-sized enterprises into large corporations. And basically how we work is we work one-on-one with the businesses that are members of our association. You would say we provide almost like a mentoring or an advisory service. We also provide, some platforms, for example, for marketing, platforms for accessing funding. We also link members to other organizations that we work with. For example, you talk of exports, we work with people like Zimtrade. We work with people like Standards Association of Zimbabwe to assist our members to, upgrade themselves. We work with other entities, your Export Credit Guarantee Corporation, and so on. So I would say what we provide is a support service to help these businesses to grow. And we also then do lobbying and advocacy, which is actually engaging your government, your ministries, departments, and agencies to try and improve the operating environment so that we have a more conducive environment for growth.
Well, thank you very much, Farai, for elaborating that, and also, clarifying the role that SME Association plays in Zimbabwe to ensure that, we've got more SMEs that are coming up. And, the issue to do with mentoring, I think, is very important and vital, especially in the growth of this business. So thank you very much for outlining that. We want to go into the second segment, and I think we'll dwell much more on the opportunities, that are found regionally, internationally, like the programs that are offered to SMEs. So we'll tap into that when we get into our second segment. Well, thank you very much, viewers, for joining us for the first segment. We were talking about SMEs in Zimbabwe, opportunities that are found, and also how they can thrive in such an economy. So do stand by as we take a short break. Welcome back to the second segment of Your Wealth. And today we are talking about SMEs. And, these are some of the businesses that we have seen growing into big businesses. We have seen them contributing to our national GDP. And they have proved to be, something that we can actually count on, especially in Zimbabwe. And in the studio, I am joined by Farai, who is a representative of the SME Association of Zimbabwe, who is helping us to unpack some of the issues that pertain to SMEs and how they operate in Zimbabwe. Now, Farai, in our first segment, we're talking about, we ended on the note where you're talking about the role that SME Association plays in supporting emerging and existing businesses. Now, I know we spoke about this, but I just want you to give us a response to this. How do we help startups transition into fully established, scalable businesses?
Yeah, all right. There's some steps that are involved. Number one, obviously, is to understand the growth path. So businesses have a growth path. Just like if you look at us as human beings, we don't just emerge fully formed. We start off as babies, and then
Exactly,
we learn to crawl, walk, and so on. So it's the same thing. We look at the stage at which any particular business that joins us is at, and then we map out a plan. The most important thing is to have a vision. In other words, to understand where exactly you want to take this business. Like what you mentioned at the start, do you want it to be a national business? Do you want it to be a regional? Do you want it to be an international business? Because that vision is what then determines what needs to be done. So we help our entrepreneurs to first come up with that vision. We also then help them to map the growth path, come up with business plans, come up with strategies around things like funding, marketing, how to run the actual business itself, because you also find that most people are good at producing a product or a service, because they have that background. But not so many are good at running a business, because and this requires business skills. So that's what we help with to a large extent, coming up with those business skills, the strategies, and then also sort of walking the path with the businesses in terms of tracking the milestones that would have established, and working towards that goal almost day by day, so to speak.
Say an individual has come to your association and they feel like they need your assistance in building a business, but they're afraid that their idea might then be taken by someone else and then probably made better, and something like that. How do you deal with those situations?
Well, the first thing I would say is that 99.9% of ideas are not original.
Okay.
Most businesses, they are doing things that are already being done. So it's very rare to find someone who has what we can call an original
idea.
Yes, but in the event, and look, to my recollection, I don't think we've had a member that has been in that particular space. But in the event that we do, well, it depends on the issues. If there's intellectual property to be protected, then we would recommend, obviously engaging with the appropriate organizations. So your ARIPO, in our local case, to protect the intellectual property. However, I would also then say that, to a large extent, what we've seen is a lot of people not coming forward with their ideas, not seeking the assistance that they need, because they think that their idea will be stolen.
Okay.
If I were to try and steal every idea that I come across, I've got about 9,000 people that we work with. So imagine, can I possibly take 9,000 ideas and implement them? I can't.
Yeah.
But what we help with, because like I said, what we are there to do, and you must understand that, everyone has particular skills or particular abilities. Our ability is to help people to grow their businesses. Okay. It's not to run with ideas, or to maybe someone who's in venture capital may be interested in something like that, to say, okay, I want to take this idea and but I would say yes, but we have heard of these stories where people have approached for example, other corporations and presented ideas, thought they were going to partner up, but then they are told that no, we can't partner with you, and then they see their product or their idea now being implemented. And I think what would have fallen short there is obviously understanding how to how to go about such engagements. Those are areas we assist with. Because you first and foremost you need an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement to protect yourself as you engage. Before you even start to talk, you need to have that in place. If you've got any intellectual property, again, you need an intellectual property agreement to also prevent anyone from taking your idea and actually executing it, because the biggest problem is when you now see your idea being implemented, you don't have any of those documents, and then it's now your word against theirs. But if it's all documented, then you have a strong case, and you probably will actually get a lot of money out of that.
All right, now on to my next question. Counterfeit products are a growing concern. And the question is now, how can SMEs protect themselves from unknowingly trading in counterfeit goods?
Yes, that one is a very difficult one. And I think, for our economy, it's a result of the breakdown of the formal economy.
Right.
It's also a result of, having too high tariffs, especially on imported goods. Because what you find is that, yes, there are counterfeiters. And they're not just even local, they are there regional, they are there internationally. But they, counterfeiters thrive in informalized environments. Because in formal environments, if you have a proper formal sector, goods work through formal supply chains. Unfortunately, in our case now, we are finding that, a lot of products are coming through informal means. Into the economy, and unfortunately, the bad part about that is whoever is doing that, number one, they are already law breakers by virtue of their activity. Number two, they don't care whether or not they supply a bad product, because as far as they are concerned, they are operating from transaction to transaction. So in terms of safeguarding, the best way is just to deal with formal players and not to deal with people that just come to you and say, I've got a consignment, why don't you take it up? So to a large extent, some of the people that engage or that end up trading counterfeit goods, they know, because they, typically the offers are obviously below the normal prices that you would find those goods at. Nice. The people are unknown people. The deals are done a certain way. So I think, primarily, I would say government needs to reset the formal environment, make it conducive, because the reason why people are now avoiding it is there's too many obstacles, too many regulations, too many taxes. So people circumvent, but that then obviously brings in the sort of things that we're seeing there. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for laying that out for us. I think we have learnt much, in regards to what needs to be done to ensure that the SMEs operate in an environment where they can actually scale up. I think when we come back in the third segment, we'll then talk about some of the barriers, as you were alluding to in your last response. So when we come back, we'll talk much more about that. Thank you very much, viewers, for joining us for the second segment of Your Wealth. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to the last segment of Your Wealth, and today we are talking about SMEs trying to get points on how these can actually thrive in an economy such as Zimbabwe. And in the studio we're joined by Farai, who is helping us to just unpack some of these issues that pertain to the growth of SMEs in Zimbabwe. Now we just want to continue with our discussion, Farai, and my question to you now is, many Zimbabwean entrepreneurs operate informally. What are the benefits of formalization, and how can SMEs be encouraged to take that step?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Look, if you look at what we are experiencing at the moment, we are experiencing informalization. Informalization simply means that the economy is converting from being formalized to being informal.
Okay.
And why this is happening is because of the policy environment, excessive taxation, regulation, adverse policies, and so on. And at the end of the day, people need to survive. So they do what they need to do to survive. So the first thing that I would say is that we definitely need government to come through and reverse some of these things. I think the Minister of Finance is on record as saying that within the next 6 months, they are looking at reviewing some of these policies. Normally, formalization would actually be the preferred way to operate because formalization would come with benefits such as being able to access financing or formal financing, the ability to access bigger markets. If we're talking of exports, there's definitely no way you can export as an informal player unless, of course, you are just a cross-border trader. So formalization does come with a lot of benefits under normal circumstances, and yes, we do have abnormal circumstances at the moment, but still you find that there are certain aspects that will improve if your business is operating formally. I think the biggest challenge that has been there has been the issue of the currency or the distortion on the currency. There's also been an issue in terms of things like your formal banking systems where the charges are now too high. So that has tended to discourage a lot of people from using these formal platforms. So once again, I would say the appeal is to the authorities to sort out these issues that have now made it almost impossible for businesses to thrive.
And what are the key barriers preventing informal businesses from registering and complying with national laws, and how can they be overcome?
It comes back to the same thing that I've been talking about: the issue of licensing, the issue of taxation. If you look at our policy environment in Zimbabwe, we've got a policy environment that was structured for large formal businesses. So we don't have any provisions for SMEs. We don't have incentives for SMEs. We don't have acts that govern SMEs or the informal sector. Other countries will encourage their small businesses to grow through providing incentives, tax breaks, and things like that. Even financing. If you go to other countries, especially the developed countries, they have small business units that are just there to help small businesses grow. Things like access to tenders, there's preferential access to small businesses so that they are able to scale up. Yeah. So, those are the sort of things that we need to put in place so that our overall environment is conducive. And unfortunately, you find that, and this is not just a Zimbabwe problem, you can almost say it's an Africa problem, or a developing country problem, where governments put more emphasis on attracting FDI, attracting big players from outside into the country, compared to the effort that they put to nurture, grow, and expand their own local businesses. It makes a lot more sense to support your small businesses to grow than to try and fight with 52 other countries in Africa, for example, to attract FDI, which also tends to hop from country to country depending on the incentives there at any point in time.
All right. Well, I've heard you talk more about the policies, of course, and the taxes that we have as a country that are, prohibiting many informal business to become formalized. Now, for you, since you are in this area of SMEs, what policies or regulatory reforms would you like to see to create a more SME friendly environment in Zimbabwe?
Well, the first reforms that we need would be the high-level ones. We need fixing of the exchange, the exchange rate, so that we have a market-determined exchange rate. We need things like IMTT removed, so that people don't shun putting their money in the bank. We need licensing to be proportionate. I know that, for example, City of Harare has tried to implement a more staggered licensing regime, but still the license fees that are charged for SMEs are still too high. It's a step forward, but still you cannot have a situation where an established large retailer pays the same license fee, or maybe just twice the license fee that an SME is paying. There's obviously a problem there. And our licensing needs to be more designed or more tailored to get people registered, to understand who they are, what they are doing, where they are, than to be a means of raising revenue, because that is the biggest challenge. If you look at our license fees, our local authorities, they are trying to raise revenue. Government is trying to raise revenue. You look at the cost of most of our services, they are much, much higher than our regional counterparts. So that makes us uncompetitive. So, those issues need to be addressed first and foremost. But the second layer, like I said, is have a more deliberate policy. Maybe if you look at our we've got an SMEs Act, but that SMEs Act does not actually give incentives. It doesn't give tax breaks. We've got SNEDCO, for example, which is a government agency that was created to provide funding for SMEs. But when you look at how much money is allocated to SNEDCO on an annual basis, it's a pittance. So we need, more deliberate funding of such institutions, more availing of money, especially because what you find is that capital is the biggest obstacle for most businesses when it comes to scaling up. So those are the sort of deliberate things that we need in place to be able to get a thriving SME sector.
All right. Now, as we close up, what will be your last words to those who are trying to, find their feet, who are SMEs and who have not yet come to your association to seek for assistance?
Well, the first thing is to come to our association, obviously. Look, I think, running a business is not, most people think that it's something that they can do intuitively or instinctively. Just look at the fact that you spend the first 21 years of your life preparing just to be an employee, but you think you can just walk into becoming an entrepreneur and do it on your own. You need assistance, whether it's from us, whether it's from other organizations. Get the assistance. You need to build your business skills. In addition to knowing how to produce your product, you need to be in a supporting environment. And so I think those would be my parting words.
Well, thank you very much for coming through to your wealth.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there you have it, viewers. Today we're talking about SMEs, how they can thrive in an economy such as Zimbabwe, and opportunities that are there for those that are looking into, getting into this SME business. So thank you very much for joining us on Your Wealth. See you next time.